former prosecutor here at Mayo. On this end, when you hear in the tortured grammar that Mr. Holleran used there, in that this is the way it works, there's no gray area here. You don't pay off, I don't care if it's county chairs, whoever it is, to get on ballots. That's not the way the process is set up. In fact, we reached out to a frequent guest here, the state Republican chairman, Ed Cox, who said the integrity, among other things, of the election process is under assault here from some of these guys. To your end, again, if this is borne out as true, and from everything we've heard, from the indictment and everything, this was a detailed investigation, wiretaps, undercover agents. It seems that they've lined up their ducks here. This is startling. This ain't gray. This is completely in the wrong side of the ledger, right?
Well, what I will say again is, going back to what Dominic said, they're innocent until proven guilty. One thing I can certainly tell you.
Got that out of the way.
One thing I can certainly tell you, though, about a federal investigation is that there's going to be a tremendous amount of information. You'll have boxes and boxes of evidence. My last federal trial involved about 106 boxes of evidence, and that's just involving basically one person. There's going to be information that we're not privy to. There'll be new discovery as the case goes forward. My understanding is there's not yet an indictment. So at this point right now, they're just charged by complaint. So we don't know that a grand jury would come back with an indictment. And of course, there's a possibility the grand jury would come back with an indictment for things much more than we're aware of right now. But I think that what's crystal clear is that we have to get money out of politics. And if you simply stop and look at who's able to get elected outside of the most local of local races, it's people who are very affluent. You no longer can have a person who's simply a working person and has tried to earn their way into it.
Opie, let me ask you, though, because we'll let this thing play out. And again, I'll do the caveat to innocence proven guilty.
We all
as
are.
much
We
fun,
all
but still,
agree on
all
that
right.
one. That's one we all
So
agree
there
on.
we go. But the premise was he was going to get on the ballot by getting basically the borough party chiefs to go along to get along. If there's a pattern that they said, yeah, this guy might have been a Democrat his whole life, but we'll do it, why not? That's stunning. And I think, forget about this is Republican, Democrat, but a whole lot of people are going to have a whole lot of answering.
Well, if you read the indictment right now at this point, and what's going on in there, it goes through specific comments about who they met with when, what cash went where. It also mentions that they approached 2 county chairs. They are not indicted. They did not take money. It basically, the way I read it as a layman, was they did nothing wrong. They were approached, whatever was going on. Who knows what cooperation was involved. There also, by the way, is a cooperating witness that was in this whole thing that reads that he or she was arrested or entangled in this, not this investigation, something else, a year ago, and then brought parties to Halloran. And then Malcolm Smith, when he started talking about running last fall at some point for mayor and trying to get the Wilson Pakula, some way, shape, or form, he connected with Halloran, and Halloran then worked with him to reach out to other county chairs. Remember, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, Democrats do this all the time as far as trying to get Wilson Pakulas as well for the Independence Party and the Working Families Party. This is a typical New York thing where with being able to get...
That's what I wanted to get from you. The underbelly of this, to get on party lines, whether it's a Working Families Party, the Independence Party, or these third-party lines that people don't really pay attention to, they get in the booth. But to get on these lines, it can get a little seedy.
Well, I wouldn't say it's seedy. I would say it's competitive politics. I mean, Simca Felder's race last year that I did, we didn't get on the conservative line. Our opponent, a sitting state senator, had it. We won that in a write-in contest by going the petition route. You can't really do that citywide. We had to hand-deliver stamps to our voters, so the names got written in right with Simca Felder. This is a typical thing. You cannot run on a party line without a Wilson Pakula unless you are a registered member of that party. So if you take Adolfo right now, who's also talking about running at this point, he can only run on the independence primary. Any other party line he wants to get onto, in this case he's talking about Republican, he has to get a Wilson Pakula as well. And anybody, Republican or Democrat, whether it be Quinn or Loda, they need to then go for the Independence Party, the Conservative Party, the Working Families Party, and get Wilson Pakulas that way to work with them to get on their lines.
We're just beginning. But Dominic, let me bring you back in and where you are right now, as you said, outside the courthouse in Lower Manhattan. You've been covering the stop and frisk trial, really the practice on trial here. Give us an update on what happened today, because, you know, again, more testimony here that really spoke to, let's just say, not too discerning a process on who to round up.
Well, Richard, another day of damaging quotes for the NYPD, but the police commander in question says that he was taken out of context. We heard the commissioner say that the other day. We heard that quite a bit again today on the stand. Deputy Inspector Steve Moriello, the commander of the 8-1 precinct, was on the stand, and some of these quotes are really out there, Richard, in terms of how whistleblowers recorded him and so on. Now, Moriello is one of the commanders that when the whistleblower caught him on tape, Moriello apparently was one of the commanding officers that took the officer to a psych ward against his will, and the officer was held there for 6 days. So this thing is a mess, Richard. Now, some of the quotes here from either Moriello or the sergeant under Moriello, they may live here, talking about Brooklyn. They may live here, but we own the block, referring to the NYPD. If they're in groups on the corner, make a move, be a bleep, shine a light in their face, and then lock them up. Now, Moriello claims for 2.5 years, Richard, that no one complained about stop and frisk. He said it only became an issue after the media started to raise it. Now, he said, now talking about young men on the corner and so on, and I'm quoting a Sergeant Stoop under Moriello, make a move. Don't move, lock them up. You can always articulate it later. Some of the other quotes, if your police activity is not up, you're going to the cemetery, meaning that you're going to have an assignment that you don't want. Now, Richard, some context for this, and I'm trying to go as fast as I can with these quotes. Shots were apparently fired 3 days in a row at 120 Chauncey in Brooklyn, and Sergeant Stoops said anybody coming out of the building, anybody at all, give them a 250, meaning no matter who it was that came out of the building, throw them up on the wall and frisk them. Now, this went on and on and on, and here's what one of the lawyers told us tonight.
What you heard from Moriello, both in the tapes and what he testified to, was the raw truth about what happens in the precincts with respect to what they're trying to get officers to do, which is, get the numbers. We're under pressure going down, under pressure going up. Get the numbers, because if you don't get your enforcement activity up, you're going out to the cemetery, as he said. One of them said anyway. So, I thought it was very powerful evidence for us.
Racist?
Well, one could argue that the characterizations in those tapes are filled with racial stereotyping, and the reference to everybody in Bed-Stuy has a warrant, the hurting of people. I mean, this is not a plantation.
One more final quote here, Richard, from the testimony today of the wiretaps of police officials. If a young person was seen with a bandana, a handkerchief, out of their back pocket, police officers were told to 250 them. In other words, throw them up on the wall and frisk them simply because they had a bandana, because the police believed that that was gang activity. As for tomorrow, Professor Jeffrey Fagan will be on the stand. He has analyzed all of the stop and frisk, and he has ruled it's unconstitutional. He is what the other lawyer told us tonight.
Well, he's going to be talking about 10 years worth of stop and frisk data, over 4.5 million stops that he analyzed going back to 2004. And he's going to talk about how at the end of the day, after you factor in crime, you factor in where police officers are deployed, that really race is what is driving the stop patterns that we see in New York City. And that's really one of our claims in this case.
Not a good day for the city. Even Judge Scheinlein, the judge, Richard, blew her cool at one point at the city's lawyer, and I am quoting here. She told the female lawyer for the city, please, I'm quoting Judge Scheinlein, please ask your next question. Move on. That's what experienced trial lawyers do. So this trial continues tomorrow. I'm Dominic Carter. Richard, let's go back to you.
All right, Dominic, thank you, and we'll continue, obviously, to cover the trial out of Lower Manhattan. We take a quick break. When we come back, though, we're going to transition to another big issue today in our region, and that is guns. Newly proposed gun legislation in Connecticut, much tougher than what is being proposed, certainly on the national level. We're going to hear from a lawmaker, congressman out of Connecticut, about why D.C. can't keep up. We'll be right back.